And in my opinion, one of the most difficult variations for black, it's bishop b5 on third move by white. I'm saying one of the most difficult variations because it's pretty defining move by white. You have to react with either bishop d7 or knight d7. And even though in most of the variations in the past, black went with bishop d7, I'm just going to show you lines with knight bd7. I'm simply of opinion if we chose to play this Scandinavian Portuguese with, in most of the variations, pawn sec, here you should be going with this continuation, trying to play knight, I don't know, trying to play a6 and b5, chasing that light square bishop away, but at the same time, in many positions, if they give up bishop for the knight on d7, you'll capture by your bishop or sometimes even by queen, and hope to be able to take advantage of the bishop pair and maybe possibly to rule out the light squares afterwards. So after knight bd7, white has basically three moves, but one is like especially good. It's c4. If they go with line like knight c3, it's not that good because they similarly defend this pawn on d5. I expect by lots of players to go with this move against you, but then you go with a6. If they play bishop a4, you just play b5 and play knight c5. If they play bishop c4, we just enter into the same type of position and you go with knight c5. What's so important about this? You'll capture a bishop on b3, you'll have a bishop pair, you'll get a pawn back on d5 very easily, and for sure black equalized. If not, I'm actually of opinion that black is even a little bit better there. In case of bishop e2, you just go with b5, bishop b7, and then you want to either play knight b6 or b4, catching that pawn on d5. So after castles b4, you take this pawn on d5, play e6. Depending on circumstances on the board, you play bishop e7 and bishop d6, short castle, and this is okay position for both sides, I would say, with mutual chances. Although, if on knight c3, a6, they just carelessly give up the bishop pair and take the knight on d7, you don't capture by bishop, even though it would be fine, but you capture by queen because you'd like to immediately get a pawn back. So if they at all costs try to like defend this pawn, anything else like knight f3, knight e2, just take on d5 and end up with a bishop pair advantage. If they play queen f3, you play b5 followed by bishop b7, you get a pawn back on d5 and your position is good. In case of bishop b5, knight d7 and d4, I believe it's one of those solid options here where you have to take on d5, and if they just continue to play very solid with knight f3, you have to play, you can play here a couple of approaches. You can play e6 and c6. You can play c6 and g6, and I like the c6 and g6 approach because it reminds me of an Alekhine defense for black and those type of positions, also Caracan type of games. So after c6, bishop e2. Bringing this bishop back to d3 sometimes wouldn't be good because we have some knight b4. Bringing bishop on c4 gives them nothing because they don't have any more possibility of c4, and they certainly don't want to give up bishop for the knight on d5. So bishop on e2 looks like a pretty reasonable continuation by white. So you play knight 7 f6. Once again, you can go g6, and this reminds me on one of variations that look almost the same to Alekhine defense. But you play knight 7 f6, castles, and here I'm about to show you two games by Magnus Carlsen. Both of these games he played in Blitz and Rapid. Actually, in Rapid he played both, and interesting enough, he lost both of these games. That actually tells you enough for itself, because In both of these games, he lost the bishop pair, and he had to suffer slightly worse position, but he lost to players like Karyakin and Anand, who are just very, very good in positional play. And let me just show you what happened there. In one of the games, Carlsen went for bishop g4, h3, swapped off this bishop for the knight. And now you just go for a typical plan in middle games, put the pawns on the color of the opponent's bishop so you can kind of restrict it. Okay, I mean, it works unless your opponent doesn't know how to take advantage of the bishop pair. Since Karyakin had white pieces, he played c4, and he certainly knew what to do. Knight b6, now he played b3 to develop the dark square bishop on b2 and to restrict the knight on b6. After bishop e7, bishop e2 castles, Carlsen played a5 to take control of the dark squares and threaten some a4. Karyakin reacted in the best fashion. Queen c7, played rook on e8, rook a to d8, and tried to improve position of the knight, playing and going to g6. It was certainly slightly better game for Sergei Karyakin here. It's not like such a disappointing position for black either, but just like I said, you can play a like a long-term game with a slightly worse position, mainly thanks to lack of space, to strength of the bishop pair for white, and a little bit more development advantage for white. And another game was different approach. So after bishop f5 instead of bishop g4, bishop f3, now Anand went for knight h4. So in both of these cases, looks like you just swap off the light square bishop for the knight. So after bishop g6, c4, knight b6, knight c3, e6, g3, bishop e7, bishop e3, queen c7 takes on g6. What's the point here? Here you have open h-file that you cannot benefit of it, but you also have a pretty stable pawn structure, even though they created the double pawns. You always should take by each pawn in this type of positions. Sometimes, if you can try and take advantage of the h-file. I'm just going to give you an idea if you really want to crazy attack long castle, queen d7, e5, and queen h3. But it's difficult because most likely what is going to play bishop f3, bishop g2, over solidifying his game, and in the long run trying to once again be able to convert like a full point and take advantage of the bishop pair. So after queen b3, rook d8, Carlsen decided to go for short castle and played a very interesting plan, e5 breaking in the center. And after e5, d5, knight bd7. If pawn takes on c6, black would always take the pawn in order to take control of the d5, and eventually Carlsen, after bishop f3, went for bishop c5. Clever idea. He's trading off the bishop pair, trying to kill one of the strongest parts in white's game, but still, thanks to an open d-file, better control of the center, better development, more active pieces, Anand was better, and eventually, once again, he beat Carlsen. Just like I said, d4 is very serious approach, and after knight f3, c6, bishop e2, this just gives slightly and a long-term better game to white. In case of c4, what I expect by most of the guys, you just go with a6. They should take on d7. Those who play bishop a4, and believe me, that's not going to be a small amount of players, it's just equally popular as bishop d7, but this gives us great counter-attacking chances. So we play b5, breaking there, c takes, and taking on d5. Here, taking on a6 is way too risky for white, because it reminds me on some type of Banco Gambit with this magnificent bishop. Now our knight can go to b4 or f4, trying to take advantage of the light squares and those weaknesses in this position. So just because of that, they don't want to take, they play knight c3, knight goes to b6. And after bishop to b3, you can play e6, but I also like g6, bishop g7, short castle with a full compensation for black. I even remember one game of Julian Hodgson where he made it some a Finnish guy in 20 moves, doing g6, bishop, g7, and short castle. Although if you play e6, d4, a takes, you just play some sort of Benko gambit with really huge compensation, so you play castles and e5. Problem of white is this bishop. They have to spend so much time on executing the bishop on a6. While they do that, we're just opening up in the center, trying to take advantage of the weak king on e1 and open e-file. And here we're just coming to a point where after c4, a6, they have to take on d7. Looks like they have to. Here we have two options. Bishop d7 and queen d7. I have lots of difficulties to decide which one is better. I like queen d7 because of position's originality and also lack of like proper number of games, mainly played by good players after queen d7. Queen d7 is quite interesting for black. I like it a lot. Queen d7 gives us c6 to break in the center, gives us e6, and gives us always very resourceful b5. So I like this one. They probably have to go with either d4 or knight f3 or knight e2. A point of this variation that we just want to go with, for example, they can go with knight f3 immediately because of queen g4. So there's a very nice trick behind this move. In case of knight e2, you just do the same. So generally speaking, I said they can go knight e2 and knight f3, but you have this trick unlike positions where the bishop is on d7. So they have to go more or less with d4. And now you have e6, you have c6, you have b5. If you play c6, it's fine. You got a bishop pair. You would like to afterwards take control over the light squares and rule out the light squares, mainly thanks to that bishop on c8. If you go with e6, they have to take. You take by queen. They play queen e2. It looks absolutely reasonable because they're up a pawn and they're happy to exchange queens. But you know what? We have to play very open, we have to play very aggressive, and we have to try to somehow use these bishops. So that's why we play b5, c5, and bishop b7. After knight f3, there are two approaches here. For example, Smerden in his book says g6 with excellent compensation with bishop g7 short castle, and if you ever capture an e6, f takes e6 with the bishop pair, open f file, open d file, and I like that position. But I maybe even like more queen takes c2, knight d5, with also possibility to play long castle, play f6, in which case we would just deprive white of any active knight e5 or knight g5 possibilities, and maybe doing some g5, h5, taking advantage of the great bishop on b7, open e-file, maybe rook e8 afterwards, and so on. Generally speaking, no matter what happens there, this position would be fine. I just want to show you a game that was played here. So after queen d7, d4, e6, d takes, queen takes, this is just one approach. I just want to show you the game with c6, knight f3, you take on d5, and they said white should be going with c5. Quite an interesting move, quite an interesting attempt to be able to use the pawn majority on the queen side. This looks like a critical continuation for black in these positions, although even though white is considered to be slightly better mainly because of these pretty strong control of the dark squares, I'm of opinion that we can play like variation with b6, in which case we just want to break the center and open up these bishops somehow. After knight e5, queen e6, I believe b4 is dangerous because we take and play knight e7, removing the knight from e5. That's the point. In case of knight c3, you just play b takes e5, and just like I said, it looks critical. We lack our development, but at the same time, we just have a bishop pair and can hope for some, let's just say, unclear positions afterwards. Just because of this, after a6, bishop d7, we play like more interesting move, bishop d7. I like a bishop d7 because it develops this bishop. It gives us c6, c6, and b5. But I also like queen d7, and keep that in mind because in most of your games, especially for lower rated guys, I expect most of these guys to play almost automatically knight f3, in which case you come up with queen g4 and get the pawn back with not just one. Actually, when c4 or g2, their position is going to fall apart like house of cards. So after bishop d7, this is like more reliable, let's just say, approach against stronger guys, because assuming that they will play d4 against queen d7. So after bishop d7, they go with d4. Here they can really play knight f3 and knight e2, but whether they play one or another, you just go with e6. For example, if d takes e6, bishop e6, we threaten to get a pawn on c4. They have to play queen e2, and we play bishop c5, not allowing them to play d4. When they play castle, we play short castle as well. I want to play bishop f5 followed by bishop d3. I want to break your pawns with crazy b5. I like to put my rook on e8. Black has a great compensation. In case of knight f3, e6, and queen e2, to be able to take on e6, we just play queen e7, and after d takes, bishop takes, short castle, we go with long castle. Reminds me of all those classic positions in Scandinavian, Portuguese, early bishop g4, and after d4, now we have to play bishop g4. We simply have to play this move. That's the only move, and this move is just enough to give you like proper compensation. Black looks good at the moment. We threaten to take the queen on e2. They probably have to swap off this. Now we're threatening on f3 and on d4. They probably have to play bishop e3, and here this is one of those moments where you have to decide whether you want to carry on playing with these bishops or probably take on f3, create like weak pawns, and with all these weaknesses, even though we're down a pawn, I believe we have a great chances to play even on a win. Finally, if they play d4 here, which is considered to be the best move, we just go with, sorry, I forgot to show you knight e2. You play e6, d takes, bishop takes, you threaten pawn. They have to play d3 to defend it. You play queen d7. Castle short, castle long. I like open d-file. Possibility to go after the pawn on d3 immediately. We can take it whenever you like. You got a bishop pair. All these things gives us like at least a slightly better position, if not initiative altogether with this slightly better game. And finally, if they play d4, we can break in two ways. I'll show you one game. We break, of course, with e6, but if in one game, I saw the game between, and found the game between Anand and Gallego. So after b5, Anand played b3, and imagine, Wishy Anand, one of the best players in the world. e6, d takes, bishop takes, Wishy took some space with e5, and this guy played typical Portuguese continuation, bishop g4. Here White had to play something, like knight f3 or knight e2 followed by short castle, but he played f3, creating like lots of typical weaknesses for White. After bishop f5, knight e2, and bishop c5. Gallego, another Portuguese guy who played this Portuguese variation, came up with this fantastic compensation for Black. Although this is just one approach, so b5 is interesting move, but if you just want to see like a real ideas after e6, you should be going with this move. After d takes e6, bishop takes e6, we threaten the pawn on c4. They have to play d5, kicking this bishop away, and we play bishop g4. Once again, knight f3 is way better than f3. But in one of the games, was f3, you once again go back to bishop f5. See the similarity between this game and Anand that game, Anand against Gallego. So that was in that game, b5 and b3 were involved. After like bishop e3, why bishop e3? Because otherwise we would be the ones who just want to play this move, bishop c5. So they play bishop e3, almost only move if you ask me. We just go with bishop e4 check. I like this Tempi move because it gives us short castle and rook e8 almost at a hand. So after knight e2 you just play, okay, here you can play queen e7 threatening this, and after queen e2 short castle with rook e8 with tremendous initiative because of lack of white's development. After king f2 castles, a3 bishop d6, knight e2, rook e8. Black has clearly a good compensation. Once again, you want to sacrifice this rook for the bishop on e3 and go with bishop c5. I'll show you a game between these two guys. Knight g3, bishop g3 is possible, followed by rook takes c3 and huge compensation after queen e7, queen c5. But in this game was bishop g6, bishop d4, and goes with knight e7. I like this move because it opens up this queen to go on h4, opens up this knight to go on e5 and d3. Eventually, you're just looking at a weak d3 square and how to take advantage of the bishop there. And after rook f1, trying to make artificial castle, knight e5, threatening knight to d3, but also threatening to take the pawn on c4. This guy played king g1. Rui Damaso, one of the strongest players of Portuguese variation, played queen h4. Quite an interesting move. He stops f4 forever because of knight g4 and starts to create some potential threats along the fourth rank. After knight c3, knight c4, he now got the pawn back, threatens knight b2 as well, knight e4, and plays bishop f4. So this was very nice. I believe that he could have played and take on e4, this, and play rook e4, which would be even better because this guy cannot take like this because of well-known mating pattern. For all of you who are unfamiliar with these mating patterns. So after knight c on e4, bishop f4, clearly looking for weaknesses of the dark squares. And after rook e1, played f5, removing this knight because right now knight on g3 becomes weak. Pawn on d5 is already weak after some rook a8, but at the moment he threatens this knight. This guy played queen d3. Black played knight e5, threatening the queen, had to take, and took on e5. On e4. After queen c4, took the piece, and Sergei Movsesian, one of the strongest world players, lost this game like this. Quite an embarrassing way to lose the game with white pieces against suspicious Portuguese Scandinavian line. I say suspicious because it's considered not to be the best amongst those top openings, and it's certainly the game very, very interesting, and that shows you like one of the major ideas in this lines. Although after d5, bishop g4, if they don't go with f3, which is certainly weakening, they should be going with knight f3. After bishop b4 check, bishop d2, queen e7, this reminds me of an Icelandic gambit where we play bishop b4 and queen e7. Short castle, logical of course move. They have to take, bringing our bishop back. They go knight c3. Why? Because we want to go with b5. Why? Why else? Because we threaten to take on f3. Position looks at least, like with a proper compensation for black. So after knight c3, breaks on the queen side with b5. I like this. Break, c takes on f3, creating, look at this. These are absolutely terrible pawns. So after a takes, knight takes, rook f to b8. you know what? Believe it or not, even after all these things, we just have to admit that black is at least slightly better in this position. I believe d5 pawn is about to fall. b2 is going to fall next move. If b2 falls, and it will surely fall, a2 is going to be weak as well. If they make castle, and when you take on b2, bishop on d2 is going to be hanging. They got to move the knight right now. They can't play a4 because of rook b5, of course. f3 and f2 are terrible pawns. h2 worth nothing. All things considered, this position looks absolutely better for black.